Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. And I am very honored to have with us today attorney Jim Sorenson. He is a partner at Sorenson Leuven law firm out of Tallahassee, and they represent credit unions in the court of law. And he just has so much great information for us today on what's happening during the COVID-19 pandemic and how the credit unions are handling things, how they should handle things in the future, and everything surrounding these issues. So I want to welcome you today. Thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our talk today and sharing some information that hopefully will be helpful to my credit union clients out there.
Absolutely. Now, first of all, let's just mention to the audience that your law firm is open for business. And I mention this because so many businesses are shut down. You are considered essential, but you are still being very careful, and you have certain practices that you've put into place to make sure that your staff and your clients stay safe. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you guys are running your business right now and how things are working.
Yeah, we are still open for business. We're still operating, but we are operating different now in this environment. We've gone to where some of us are working remotely. I'm working remotely. I'm right now in my home. This is my home office here, and I've been spending a lot of time in this room servicing my clients, answering emails, talking to clients, doing video conferencing from here. We have other lawyers who are also working from home, and but we also have some staff who are in the office. Some of our work has to be done from an office. We have certain equipment, mail that has to be sent out, so we still have people in the office. And what we've done is we've gone to a shift schedule to make sure that we can keep everyone spread out. So we've spread our staff out between the two floors of our office. We have no more than 10 people at any time. In most cases, it's 8 or 9 people in the office, and they're working shift schedules, and the rest of us are working remotely to take care of our clients.
Well, I think that's fantastic. It's very responsible, and it sounds like everything is running smoothly right now for you and your law firm. I mean, this is something that's affecting a lot of businesses, and there are other businesses that have all of a sudden had to start working remotely. Can you speak to some of the challenges and also some of the things that the credit unions have been doing to run their business during this pandemic?
Yeah, the credit unions have had their own unique struggle, and I think every business has its own unique struggle um, during this pandemic. But for my clients, knowing kind of what they're dealing with, um, the credit unions are considered an essential business, and it is a business where um, they have to be open to provide access to people's funds, to work with people on paying their loans or working out their loans. And so credit unions have had to deploy their workforce remotely in a lot of cases. They are having to serve more and more people remotely, and they're just battling with keeping their employees safe. I mean, that's the number one fear, is that you're going to have an employee who is working, and as a result of doing their job, they contract the disease. And so, as an employer, they're trying to protect their employees while they still, in certain situations, are interacting with the public, whether it's through a drive-through or at an actual branch where someone has to come in and do something in person. Um, some of the struggle has been, while most credit unions, just like any financial institution, a bank or anything else, they've provided electronic services. You've had the ability to do remote banking through an app or online service or an ATM. The reality is that those technologies have generally not been widely adopted. There are certain segments of the population, whether it's certain ages of the population or certain social economical portions of the population that didn't necessarily feel comfortable using those technologies, and now they have people who are having to use that technology. And so the credit union, of course, is trying to walk those people through. I think about my parents who are elderly and not so tech savvy, and having to do more and more remote banking or online banking can present challenges to how do you serve your clientele. And so those are some of the things they've been struggling with specifically in the credit union industry.
Wow, you know what? My heart really goes out to them. I mean, that is so concerning. And you and your firm as well. I mean, to be in the front lines and working with the public during the pandemic to make sure that as many things as possible can still run smoothly, the essential things. And so that's definitely those are some great points that you made about how, they have to keep their employees safe, while also helping their clients, especially the ones that are not tech savvy. So, in a way, they're working differently and they're probably getting a much larger volume of customer service calls. And, it's a lot to handle where typically you'd hire more people right away if you knew something like this was going to happen with a surge of customer service calls. But, there was really no time. This all happened so quickly. And I'm not sure, how are they handling the extra volume?
Yeah, so what I've seen is they're shifting employee responsibilities, and they are spending more time handling inbound calls. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things that just people are worried about, whether it's worried about how am I going to pay my loan, or maybe they're right now we're seeing a lot of questions about the stimulus checks. The stimulus money is starting to go out earlier this week, and so there can be questions about, hey, when's my money going to arrive? When can I expect my check? Why isn't my check in my account? All those types of things are questions that they're having to field on top of all the normal questions. So you're right, the call volume has gone up, and they haven't had time to hire new people. And so, and even if they did, there's a training and all of that goes with it. So what they're doing is they're shifting people around, and they're letting certain functions aren't getting the attention that the more important functions need. So we've seen them trying to flex their staff and flex their schedules to adapt to those needs and adapt to those high volumes.
That's a really interesting point that you make, Jim. I mean, you can almost think of this as, some of the same challenges that the healthcare system is having right now, where you've got people that come in for, their regular services, and maybe somebody has, a disease or cancer or something, and they need to come in and get their treatments. Well, the same thing with banks. There are people that come in on a regular basis. They're opening up a new business. They've got questions. And that there's a certain volume that they're used to getting for these other clients that that maybe they really make a lot of their money off of. And with the same thing with the healthcare system, whereas now these other services are taking a back burner to the most immediate need. And so for banks, it's going to be questions on a myriad of issues that are happening. And I know we're going to tackle some of those right now. Let's talk a little bit about the delinquency that the credit unions are going to be facing in the future for sure. How are they handling the delinquencies right now?
Well, one of the areas that I work with, or my team and I work with at the credit unions, is what we would call collection departments. They're not always called collection departments. Sometimes they have other names. They go by other names: member service department, member solutions department, etc. But in just the generic term of the collections department, they're the department that is tasked with controlling delinquencies. And right now, they're trying to deal with a lot of short-term issues. So you've got kind of the if you think about it, before the pandemic really hit, or before it got serious, if you will, going back to maybe February and before, you had members who were delinquent for whatever reasons. But all of a sudden, the pandemic hits and these stay-at-home orders start happening, and people are having to self-quarantine, et cetera, and businesses are being implicated and shut down and affected. And now all of a sudden, you have people who have been current, running current, paying their bills on time, and all of a sudden they're worried about, how am I going to make the payment next month? I all of a sudden can't work, or maybe their hours were reduced, or now in order to work, they've got to figure out how to provide care for their child who's no longer in school. All these things implicate, cause problems in how just the average consumer manages their money, manages their bills. And so, what the credit unions have done is have offered a lot of short-term assistance, what we would typically refer to as a skip a payment or a deferment. And those have been generally aimed at those who were current but have been impacted by the pandemic and may not be able to make the next couple of payments. So what they're doing is allowing them to skip, let's say, the April and May payment. So the next payment on their auto loan or their personal loan or their mortgage loan is not due until June. So they're handling that, but they're still having to handle those members who were delinquent before the pandemic hit. And while they want to work with those members, the challenge tends to be trying to get those members to communicate. What I have found is most of my clients are being very flexible right now. And even people who were delinquent before the pandemic, they're willing to work with them. They're willing to try to modify the loan, work with them to get back on track. But they can only work with somebody if the consumer is willing to reach out. So a lot of their time and effort is trying to reach out to those people and resolve those delinquencies.
Thank you so much for letting us know about how they are handling delinquencies. And it's nice to know that they are being a little more lenient during a time when people really can't pay their bills if they've lost their job and they were already living paycheck to paycheck. So this is good, and hopefully everybody gets back to normal really quick. And on that note, let's talk about the stimulus checks. I know that this has got to be a taxing situation for the credit unions. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the stimulus checks?
Yes, we are seeing, in talking to the clients that I have, talking to the credit union clients that I have, we are seeing a lot of questions and a lot of issues regarding the stimulus check. I saw earlier today a couple news articles about glitches with the stimulus payments, people upset because the payments aren't flowing like everybody thought they would. And what we've got to remember is this was all put together rather quickly. This law was passed a couple of weeks ago, and the law did not give details on how the stimulus money would be sent out. And so the IRS had to come up with some rules. And there has been pressure to get this done quickly because obviously people, the average consumer, they need money. And the idea was to get it in consumers' hands as quick as possible. So the way this is happening, or at least some of the money is happening, is the IRS is sending it out through what we would call direct deposit. It's actually ACH. And they're able to do that based upon banking information they have from the average consumer's tax return. And so in this case, a lot of the times they're using tax return information from the 2018 tax return. So it would be where your account was, or your account information from a year or more ago. And what is happening is, in a lot of cases, that where you bank may have changed. And you think about people. We've had calls where clients have gotten money, and the member, the individual whose the money is for, is now dead. And so there's questions. What do we do? Does a deceased person get the money? And then there's questions about, as you can imagine, divorce situations. We had one client reach out to me where they're a year ago, so in 2018 or in spring of 2019, when the members were filing their 2018 tax return, they were still married. They had a joint account at the credit union, and so that tax refund a year ago went to the joint account. Now you fast forward, and they are now divorced. They joint account no longer exists. They each their own account. So husband has an account, wife has an account, but the stimulus payment comes in, and I don't remember how many children there were involved, but let's just say they had two children. So the stimulus payment comes in, 1,200 for each adult, plus 500 for each child, so that's 3,400, and it comes in payable to husband and wife to the joint account, and the joint account doesn't exist anymore. So what do you do with that? Who's entitled to that money? Who's entitled to the children's portion of the money? And so, these cause complications, and of course, the credit union can't be in the position of deciding, does wife get the money? Does husband get the money? Does it get divided down the middle? Um, and so, these are all some of the problems that are happening. And of course, we've had situations where maybe the money went into a girlfriend account. Last year, a guy's dating a girl and he doesn't have a checking account, so he uses his girlfriend's checking account for his tax refund. And now this year, the money comes to the girlfriend's account, but they're no longer dating. And the girlfriend now has this guy's $1,200. So, we've seen all sorts of situations like that where it's not running as smoothly as we would hope. And of course, you can imagine everybody wants to know where their money is. They want to know, do you have your money? And so this is causing an increase in calls, and the credit unions are kind of caught in the middle. They're the middleman. They're not the ones who made the decisions of where this money goes, but they're the ones who, have to obviously process these ACHs so it can get to the appropriate individual.
Wow, that really seems quite complicated. I can imagine that. I didn't realize that they were depositing it into people's accounts. I mean, I know people that have several different bank accounts. I mean, how do they even decide which bank gives the stimulus check out, or which credit union even?
Well, my understanding again is in most cases, it's based on what was on your 2018 tax return. So if in 2018 you listed ABC Credit Union or ABC Bank, that's where the IRS is going to default. And you may no longer have that bank account. That bank account may have been closed. And of course, there's a lot of that we're seeing where the accounts are closed, so the money can't go into the account. The money has to be returned to the IRS.
Wow, this seems like it's going to take a long time to fix, and figuring out who gets what and which banks gave the checks out. It seems like yeah, it seems like it's going to be a huge mess. I'd love to know, like, what's some of the advice that you give the credit unions surrounding stimulus check distribution?
Well, the biggest concern, obviously, is we want to make sure that that the money is going to the right individual. What they don't want to do, let's take the example of the girlfriend, right? You don't want the money going to the girlfriend and the girlfriend taking the money, I should say the ex-girlfriend, taking the money and spending it. And now John Doe, their person who was supposed to get the money, is now saying, hey, credit union, you gave the money to the wrong person. You owe me $1,200. So that's part of the pitfall, part of the advice we're trying to walk them through. The same with deceased accounts. Under the law, deceased people can get the refund. It actually would go to their estate. So if someone died in February, they're going to get a stimulus payment, but obviously it no longer belongs to the deceased person. It actually belongs to their estate. And who has the right to receive that money on behalf of the deceased individual's estate? really depends on state law. So it may be different in Massachusetts than it would be in Florida, or different in Georgia than it would be in Kansas. And so we're trying to make sure that if that money does come in, the credit union knows how to handle it, and again, not have to pay it out twice, because if they give it to the wrong person and then the correct legal representative of the estate shows up and demands that money, they may have to pay it out again. And so what we're trying to do is help our clients get the money to the right person, not make a mistake. The other thing the other pitfall that I think some of the clients aren't always aware of is the idea of reopening an account. There is some guidance out there from the CFPB. The CFPB a couple of years ago took action against USA National Bank, or USA Savings Bank, excuse me. And in that action, one of the things that USAA was doing was reopening their customers' accounts after the account had been closed, in order to accept ACH, or in order to accept other automatic deposits. And the CFPB took the position that under federal law, that was a violation of federal law, that it was an unfair, deceptive, and abusive practice. And as part of that practice, there were other things they were doing as well. USA Bank was fined over $12 million. So, the credit unions can't just reopen the account without the member or customer's approval of that. And so while they may be trying to act in a way to help their customer, help their member, they need to do it in a way that's legal and safe and doesn't open the door to other potential problems for the credit union.
Oh my gosh. This sounds like a potential nightmare for the credit unions. I'm glad that you are thinking of the strategies and helping them play defense going forward, because they could end up another business that goes under from this pandemic for many of the reasons that you just mentioned. Are there any other pitfalls that you've been helping them with during this pandemic?
Yes, some of the other pitfalls that we've just been walking them through is dealing with the loss mitigation issues. We've talked about this already, but a lot of the credit unions are working with their members to help them stay current on their loans, or not fall any further behind, and or hopefully get caught up. And they're doing a lot of these, what I'll call loss mitigation. The most common is the skip a payment that we talked about earlier. They're going to let the member not skip their payment for April and May, and their next payment is now due in June. And while that is perfectly legal and quite common, what they have to do is they need to make sure that that's clearly communicated to the member, to the borrower, and the borrower understands what's happening. The reality is, when you say, okay, you get to skip your payment for April and you get to skip your payment for May, and your next payment is due in June, the consumer may not fully understand what that means. And what the law requires is that you provide clear and concise information to that consumer so they understand the effects of that. Obviously, interest continues to accrue on the loan. We may know that, but does the consumer understand that? So there needs to be that disclosure. Hey, interest will continue to accrue on your loan. And then what is the effect of those skip payments? And that's really the question of what happens to those payments. Are they added to the back of the loan, or are they just skipped? And when I make my payment in June, now that payment is going purely to interest, which means as a result, there will now be a balloon payment due at the end of maturity. So it's just making sure the consumer understands what is happening. And those are part of the concerns. The other pitfall that comes into play, and this is for our larger clients, and it's related to mortgage loans, is so there are mortgage servicing rules that apply to what is called a large servicer. And a large servicer is any creditor or servicing agency. So it could be a credit union, it could be a bank, it could be other um, lenders or servicing companies who service mortgages, and it's 5,000 or more mortgages. They service 5,000 or more mortgages. So larger credit unions in my area of expertise are subject to this rule. And one of the parts of this rule, or one of the particular rules of the larger subset of mortgage servicing rules, is the loss mitigation rule. And the loss mitigation rule has certain requirements. And one of the things that the pitfall that's out there is, I think a lot of people are assuming that just because the member is current and I offer them certain assistance, the loss mitigation rule and the mortgage servicing rules don't come into play. And that is not true. Depending upon the specifics of how the loss mitigation is offered and the type of the assistance that's offered, the loss mitigation rule may come into play. And it has certain requirements of the credit union or whoever the servicer is. And some of those requirements are very technical. And if you don't do the rule right, you could get in trouble with your regulator, or you could face a lawsuit by the consumer. There has been some guidance put out by the regulators. The federal regulators got together and issued a joint guidance on this, and they've provided some good information. So the credit unions certainly want to look at that guidance and read it and understand it. They have questions, we can certainly help them with that. But what's important is, while the guidance does give some leeway, it acknowledges that there are certain parts of the rule that are hard to comply with now and gives some leeway. That leeway is only given from the regulator perspective. It does not protect them from the disgruntled member hiring a lawyer and suing them. So they still need to be cautious, and they still need to do their best effort to comply with that rule to protect the credit union in the future.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. It sounds like your credit unions are lucky to have you as their law firm. And I guess I wanted to talk to you about some of the strategies that, I mean, there's so many pieces that you've talked about today. What are some of the strategies that you've come up with to help the credit unions with the future, and how to move forward from this pandemic?
So we've done a couple of things. One, we've for the interim, or the immediate period, is we've started hosting every week, and we've done two of them, hosting a weekly roundtable via Zoom. So a virtual roundtable for our credit union clients and even non-clients to participate in, and to come together, gain some information, share information, and talk about how they're dealing with the particular problems that everybody's facing. You know, most credit unions are all facing the same problems. They may look a little different, but at the end of the day, they're the same problems. And so we've been doing these hour and a half virtual Zoom meetings, and my firm's been hosting them. I act as the moderator, and we've got our next one scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. If someone listening to this is interested and doesn't have that information, they can reach out to Whitney and my law firm, and we can get them more information, or of course they can contact me as well. But that's kind of the short-term thing. The other thing that I've been doing, and this has been more one-on-one, is I've been working with certain clients on kind of what I would call disaster planning moving forward. You know, I've talked about disaster planning before at our seminar. My firm hosts a seminar every summer, and at our seminar last August in Orlando, we had a session on disaster preparedness, and of course talked about different types of disasters, and had actually a panel discussion with a couple clients who had dealt recently with Hurricane Michael. And in Florida, when we think of disasters, that's usually where our minds go. We go to hurricanes. That's what we're used to. And this disaster, of course, is much different. It has a much broader scope. It and we really don't know as we sit here right now how long it's going to last. The hurricanes, they come through rather quick. The effects of them can be felt for months or even years, but we don't really know what this is going to look like 2 months from now, or 4 months from now, or a year from now. And so what we're trying to do is do some forecasting and some planning in putting a plan in place. If this happens, how do we deal with it? What's our game plan moving forward? And so as we've started doing that, and as I've worked with some of my clients on that, I was trying to gather some information and found this chart. It was very interesting, and I think it's helpful in looking forward and trying to build a plan. So my biggest concern is I don't want to see credit unions caught flat-footed. I don't want them to be unprepared for what may come. And I certainly don't know what's going to come, but often we can look at history and get some sense as to maybe what's going to happen. And so this chart I found was a chart from that covered credit union delinquency, average credit union delinquency from 1995 through 2017. And it was matching it or comparing it to the national unemployment rate. And of course, the highest national unemployment rate during that period of 95 to 2017 was back during the housing crisis, 2009, 2010. And so if you look at this chart, it's pretty telling. In late 2009, the national unemployment rate reached its peak of 10%, just over 10%. And the average credit union delinquency rate peaked a quarter later, about 3 months later, at 1.9%. Before the housing crisis, unemployment was 4.5%, which is considered full employment by economists. And the average credit union delinquency rate was 0.6%, 0.6%. What we saw was in a 2-year period of time, unemployment more than doubled, went from 4.5% to just over 10%. So just more than doubled. But the delinquency rate went from 0.6% to 1.9%, which was more than a 3. It more than tripled. And so what you see is it's not exactly in comparison. You can't say, well, unemployment doubles, delinquency will double. In fact, it appears delinquency moves faster than unemployment, or at least did in the last recession. So when you start looking at and comparing it to where we are now, at the end of March, unemployment was 4.4%, which is right where it was before the Great Recession. And in February, it was actually 3.5%. So it's already moved 90 basis points in 1 month. We don't know where April's going to end, but some of the projections are April could be anywhere from 7 to 9%, which would put us very close to where we were at the top of the recession. And there's some projections that by June, you would see 12% or higher unemployment, which means we would anticipate delinquencies increasing greatly over the next several months. Now, how fast that happens really does depend upon several things. One, what does the government do? How do these stimulus checks, do they really help? Do some of the other things the government has put in place really going to help and prevent those delinquencies? Or are we going to see continued layoffs, continued business closings, continued bankruptcies? But what I'm trying to encourage my clients to do is to put together a plan, right? If they're used to delinquencies at 0.6% and delinquencies double, how many men and women will they need in their collection department to properly service those loans? And what's the game plan to do that? And do they have the training in place? Do they have the everything in place? And if they don't, what are they going to have to do to get in place? Let's come up with a plan and let's plan looking forward. So that is some of what we're trying to do, work with our clients. And of course, part of that is also involves some training. One of the things that back during the housing crisis, back in the 2010, 2011, a lot of our clients were used to dealing with mortgage modifications, deeds in lieu. They were used to dealing with mortgages and foreclosure in bankruptcies, excuse me. And now that the economy has gotten better, um, they don't see a lot of those things. And so some of that knowledge they had of a decade ago has gone away, and they need to look back and update procedures and maybe provide training to their staff. So, that's one of the things we're working with clients is, hey, what are your training needs? If we're planning looking forward, what does your staff need to be trained on that maybe they're not up to speed on, or they need a refresher in anticipation for what we see coming, or at least believe may be coming. Again, none of us know, but it's always better to have a plan than no plan at all. And so that's what we're trying to encourage our clients to do.
That's fantastic. I mean, and I know that, you've really worked hard to help your clients prepare. And in fact, I saw that presentation that you made on disaster planning, and it was just incredible. I mean, these credit unions down where you are in the Florida area, they are used to having a lot of things pop up, like a hurricane, for example. So some of them, I'm hoping, have things in place to help out during this type of a crisis. My question to you would be, do you feel like a lot of them have the disaster planning in place already because of where you are? Or are they at that advantage? Or do you feel like some of them really need to catch up?
Well, all credit unions are supposed to, by federal regulation, have a disaster plan in place, a business continuity plan, emergency operations, and certainly in Florida, they all do, and those plans have been tested. Um, in actuality, they've not just been tested in a simulation; they've been tested through hurricanes, and there hasn't been a part of the state that hasn't been touched by a hurricane to some extent over the last 10 years. So they do have that background to draw upon, those lessons to draw upon. But again, this is something that is different. It's not. In a hurricane, we typically worry about how are we going to get power to a branch so that employees can work. How are we going to deal with a branch that may have been damaged in the storm? Um, and how are we going to deal with employees that may have been their homes may have been destroyed. So this is a little bit different. We're not dealing with the destruction of property, but we are dealing with certain disruptions, right? How are we dealing with employees that have to work in a social distancing world, and what does that mean? And how long are they going to have to work remotely or in a socially distancing world? And then really, what is the effect of the economic fallout? It is different than a hurricane. A hurricane tends to have a localized economic effect, and depending on the level of damage, that really goes to the impact on the local economy. But there is usually insurance that comes into play to fix buildings, and money gets spent. And there's a rebuild that sometimes can be a boon to that local economy. This pandemic has a much different characteristics. So while they have plans in place, I think they're having to evaluate and modify those plans, because this is something that is different. And again, it's something none of us have lived through or experienced in our lifetime.
Yeah, and it could take a lot longer to recover than what some people have to recover from. And it's nationwide. It's not just what you're handling right there in like maybe one or two areas that get hit by a hurricane. So that is very interesting. And I mean, it's great that they have some experience to draw from. And I just remember a lot of those stories were so vivid about branch managers trying to drive to the branch and having to climb over a giant tree and walk 2 miles in the rain. I like you really painted a lot of very vivid pictures of what it was like during some of these tough times. But now we're talking about kind of an invisible enemy. A lot of people are saying, and you don't. There's so many variables that we haven't handled before, and so I can see where you would have to come up with some new strategies on the fly to handle a situation that no one has ever seen before.
Yeah, it's interesting, Erica, to think about. I did that disaster planning session at our seminar last year, and you were there, and you heard it. Um, but little did I know, that obviously less than a year later, we were all going to face a pandemic that was going to affect more than just our credit union industry. It was going to affect every industry, but obviously touch the credit union industry and touch my own business and touch your business. And it's it's been a very learning, a lot of learning and a lot of growing, and we're blessed to have such great clients that we get to work with through all these challenges.
You are, and I believe that they are blessed to have you as well, because in the coming months you are really going to be someone that they look to. And already for weeks you have been doing a weekly meeting for your clients, and or for some people that aren't your clients. So I think that's fantastic, and I do appreciate that you're doing this for the credit unions and for some other businesses that might really need the help and the advice. So thank you so much for doing that.
We're excited to offer that opportunity, and certainly would invite anybody who wants to participate to be part of it.
That's fantastic. So we've gone over a lot of information today. I'm wondering, is there anything that we might have missed?
I think the only thing that I would add is, the one challenge we didn't talk about is just how fast everything is changing. The laws are changing, the guidance is changing. It seems like every day there is a new issue to consider, or a new guidance from a federal agency to consider, or a new aspect of the law that maybe hasn't been considered, or a new problem arises. And so I think our clients just need to, one, be flexible, and credit unions need to be quick to reach out to their professional support system, whether it's lawyers like myself, or accountants, or other experts in their various fields, to guide them through all the various minefields that are out there in this changing landscape that literally can change from day to day. Whether it's a local government or a governor issuing a new order, and how that impacts the credit union or any other business, to new agency guidance and or new emerging threats that exist out there. It's changing so fast, faster than any time I can remember in my legal career of 20 plus years.
Oh, it certainly is. And I know it's a lot for you to keep up with, for anyone to keep up with, but I can tell you that we are all very grateful for the smart people in the world like yourself, who are out there keeping up with it and coming up with new strategies on a daily basis. And, really just trying to think ahead on what the possible issues might be and the pitfalls. And, it's fantastic that you've been really working hard on this with your clients, and finding ways to get that information out there. You're doing your part, and we really appreciate that. And I want to thank you for coming on today, because, without people like you, I don't know where all the businesses would be with a pandemic like this.
Well, Erica, thank you for hosting this and giving me this opportunity, and appreciate the time you've spent with us today.
You are very welcome. It was my pleasure. We'll be talking to you next time, and thanks again.